The wild Mitchell River flows down out of the mountains and across the Lindenow Flats. This is one of Victoria's most important farming districts, growing a third of the state's vegetables each year. This area sustains the hungry cities of southeastern Australia and helps to make nearby Bairnsdale one of the wealthiest towns in rural Victoria. The river continues on into the Gippsland Lakes system, one of Victoria's most beautiful natural areas. But all this is under threat if a mining company called Kelbar Resources gets its way. Right across Victoria, rural communities are being invaded. Mining companies want to take the wealth that lies beneath the land. Kelbar Resources is a tiny unlisted Australian company that was created in 2011 by the directors of Hillgrove Resources Limited to siphon away profits from the sale of a controversial mineral lease in Indonesia.
Saya berani mati karena tanah ini.
The corporate HQ of Kelbar Resources is a Perth-based office front, completely devoid of staff. In fact, Kelbar Resources has never operated a mine before. It generates no real income, has no full-time employees, and has run at a loss since it was created. The company appears to be controlled by 5 shareholding blocks, including 2 obscure entities registered in the British Virgin Islands. In 2014, Kelbar began planning a mine in Glenelladale, just a few hundred metres south of these farms and the Mitchell River. 20 square kilometres of this plateau will be gouged out by a series of vast open-cut strip mines, up to 45 metres deep and extending for 17 kilometres. Kelbar is calling its proposed mine the Fingerboards Mineral Sand Project, after this historic intersection. It would be a massive mineral sand mine, just like this one in Western Australia, and produce zircon used in bathroom ceramics, titanium for white pigment in toothpaste, and small amounts of rare earth metals used in electronics. But this deposit is also radioactive, and a community lives here. Kelbar has employed Dr. Victor Hugo as its CEO and public face. Originally from South Africa, he's a man with decades of experience in the mining industry. It's Victor's job to promote the Fingerboards Mine project and to hold off fierce community opposition, just long enough to secure government approvals so mining could begin.
I don't believe you. All right, well, you may not believe me, but this is based on... I've been with the company for just over 2 years, and I've been the CEO since February this year. What we have here is what we feel, as I said before, one of the best undeveloped mineral sands resources in the world. The economics are very robust from what we can tell. So we're anticipating that there should be no reason why the mine should stop.
Our first experience with Kelbar was when Rob Bishop, the Chief Executive Officer, rang up one Sunday afternoon, and his phone call was along the lines of, "We have the drilling rigs in the area and we want to start on your property with exploration drilling tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Is that okay?"
Rick and Susan Coleman's family farm is located in Glenelladale, and the company will need to get control of the family's property before mining can begin.
For us, it actually came out of the blue. They'd approached a number of other properties in the past, and we'd just assumed that we weren't in the project area. We'd been burnt out a few months earlier with a bushfire. We'd lost a lot of stock, we'd lost our home, yards, sheds. So at that stage, we were still trying to work out how the hell to get our lives back in order. And then suddenly, bang, this came out of the blue like a sledgehammer.
About half of the Coleman's farm will be dug up by the mine, and under Victoria's biased mining law, a landowner has no legal right to stop a mining company from taking their land once government approvals have been obtained. Kelbar can either choose to buy or rent the property, and if it rents the Coleman's farm, they won't get it back for the life of the mine, or about 20 years.
In Western Australia, if a mining company wants to access agricultural land, it has to be with the full knowledge and agreement of the landholder. And if the landholder doesn't agree, end of story, the mine doesn't happen.
But in Victoria, the mining law is rigged in favour of the miners. Because when the mining department regulator issues a mining exploration lease over a farm, the owners have no legal power to stop it or challenge it in the courts.
What we're standing in, should the mine go ahead, will be a hole in the ground about 40 metres deep. Our house is northwest of here. It will be less than a kilometre from the mine void and about a kilometre from one of their processing plants. It's going to be 24-hour noise, it's going to be 24-hour light pollution, and potential for a lot of dust over the house. These people aren't a mining company, they're professional gamblers who make a living by parasitising off communities. They come in, they screw up a community, they put everyone through a hell of a lot of angst, then they sell on the licence and just move off to parasitise on another community. They're totally scum of the earth.
We definitely recognise that we need to build a reputation within the community to become trustworthy. There's work to be done, and that is not. The reality is that that's not done through what we say; it's done through what we do.
Here at Kalbar, we're allegedly in the business of buying up cheap mineral exploration leases, dressing them up as fancy mining projects, getting government approvals, then selling them off to gullible investors for a huge profit. Are you looking to invest in a mining project that seems too good to be true? Well, come on down to the $4 billion world-class Fingerboards mineral sand mine. We've got zircon, titanium, rare earth metals, and they all have to go to China. Forget that in 2012, Rio Tinto, a real mining company, decided this deposit wasn't viable to mine. Forget their comprehensive study and drilling that found the minerals here are not profitable to mine because they're too contaminated and radioactive. Forget any chance of selling this contaminated sand unless you sell it far below the actual cost of production. Rio Tinto was wrong to say this deposit was a dud because we've found a hidden strata of rich mineral sand that they must have somehow missed. Now you're thinking, but Kalbar, the geologist who found this hidden strata, is one of your directors and a major shareholder in your company. But don't worry, here's our CEO to clear things up.
Is there a conflict of interest? How can you expect investors to believe that the geologist, who's a major shareholder and a director of Kalbar, doesn't have an interest in making it look like there's a lot of valuable minerals underground?
The short answer is no, there's no conflict of interest.
That's a bulletproof guarantor, if ever there was one. So come on down to the Fingerboards Mineral Sand Mine, an amazing investment opportunity. You can trust Kalbar.
Halfway along.
6 key landowners are refusing to sell out to the company, including farmer Jeff Johnson and his family. No investor will buy Kalbar's project until the company can get control of all the farms across the mine site.
Go down here.
At the bottom of the Johnson property, the Mitchell River has cut away the Glenelladale Plateau, exposing the layers of mineral sand that Kalbar claims it will mine.
You can see the layers once you get under that gravel. To me, that is what's under there, and that's what they'll be digging out.
So that's it, is it?
It's got all these colours in it and sand, real fine sandy nature and the dust. That's the Mitchell River Flats out in front of us here. They mean everything to the local economy. They're the lifeblood of the area. The mine is just straight in front of us up on the plateau. Probably another 70 feet above where we're standing here, the top of it will be. The dust will just blow straight off the top of the plateau, straight down the flats here with a southwesterly, and back across the hill country here with a northwesterly.
The Victorian Mining Act considers a farm to be nothing more than land, not a business. So if Kalbar forces the Johnsons off their farm, they will only be compensated for the market value of the land, but nothing for the loss of a farming business they've built up over 40 years.
You're pretty fat, aren't you? Eh? You're too fat, you buggers.
One day when Jeff returned to his house for lunch, 2 men from Kalbar Resources, including one of its directors, entered the property and began marking out locations to start drilling his land.
I said, what are you up to? And I said, oh, we're just marking some holes to drill. I said, oh. And I said, who give you permission? Oh, no one. We just thought we'd come in and, have a look.
Jeff, do you believe Kalbar when they say they're going to rehabilitate your farm within 3 years of mining ending?
I'm pretty sure that they won't get it back anywhere near what it is now. It'll be decades, I reckon, before it comes, back, well, if it ever comes back to what it is today.
Joseph, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
What do you mean they're going to lose their farms to the mine?
Well, Jeff Johnson, for instance, is going to lose his farm to the mine.
We will actually rehabilitate it and give it back to him. We'll compensate him adequately for it.
So Jeff Johnson's now in his 70s. Kalbar is going to be in operation for 20 years, so you're going to give Jeff's farm back to him when he's 90. And you say that has no impact on his life?
I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact. There is an impact. Look, I'm not sure that you should be talking on behalf of Mr. Johnson. I mean, it's a private matter between the company and Mr. Johnson.
The land sale contracts Kalbar is pushing onto local farmers includes a gag clause which prevents them from ever speaking out against the mine.
Used to be a house near the box tree, not this one, the second one, just up on the hill there. My great-grandfather built it.
Behind the scenes, the National Party has supported the mine, and both the federal MP, Darren Chester, and the local MP, Tim Bull, have failed to give the farmers here any support.
I do feel it's an unfair fight. We don't seem to have any power to really fight these things, The only thing the government thinks about is what royalties it can get. But, and I suppose the more broke the government is, the more they like the idea and sort of bugger the rest of us. I'm not ready to stop farming yet. I'll fight for my farm the best way I can and afford. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who'll back me up. We'll stand up to them for as long as we can.
Tim McKenna and his family own this dairy farm just down the road from the fingerboards at Glenalladale. Kalbar's proposed mine will come right to the boundary of their farm, and the McKennas are one of 85 homes within 2 kilometres of the mine boundary, whose lives will be severely impacted during the 20-year life of the mine.
I've been here for 25 years and it's been a big part of my life. I started when I was 21. It's my identity, I suppose, in a way. Pretty much every dollar we had when we were kids went into the farm. We didn't have a swimming pool, we didn't have holidays. Every spare minute, Mum and Dad worked up the bush, as they called it. They'd go up there and they'd pick up manuka roots and rocks and they'd heap up the windrows and burn them, and then they'd get a dam on it and fence it, and they'd have another paddock. They just did that over about 30 years. And that's really hard to walk away from, that sort of connection. It's just not right that someone can come in and strip all that work away. If it does go ahead, we'd have to think of our kids and make a very difficult decision to leave here. They're stressed too, even though we try and keep it from them. We don't talk about it in front of them, but they know, they pick up on things.
You think they might be hiding it from you?
Maybe, yeah. If they are, they're doing a good job.
The impacts on us would be so great because we're so close to it that I couldn't see us having a future here. They think that will be acceptable collateral damage. The net gain will outweigh the problems the locals will face, and they can just move on, and it'll be something that's happened on their watch that they can be proud of, and eventually will be forgotten about, and the job will be right. We're only really one step away from them getting approval. We'll do all we can to stay here, but I'm not a politician, I'm a dairy farmer. I can only operate within my own sphere of influence, and I can do what I do well, but I don't know the law. I can only state my case, which is we have a life out here, and it's a life that we've built up over a long period of time, and we want to keep it.
Before Kalbar can get a licence to mine, it needs to complete an environmental effects statement, called an EES. This is part of the Victorian Government's token development approvals process. An EES is supposed to examine all the environmental and social threats of a proposed development and help inform the minister when they make a decision. But the process is biased because all the studies in an EES are done by the developer and their paid consultants and not by independent experts. The Environmental Effects Law was created in 1978 and has never been reformed. It's now hopelessly out of step with modern science and community standards. It's an outdated relic of the 1970s, when communities were locked out of government decision-making and concepts like climate change and biodiversity were little known. Australia was still hunting whales, logging rainforests, spraying DDT and plundering natural resources with little concern for the environment. Victoria's Environmental Effects Law gives the Planning Minister executive power to recommend if a project should be approved. And unlike most other laws, the public can't even appeal his decision in a court. The mining industry helped write the original EES law, and for 44 years, they've lobbied successfully to prevent any reform. And of the 40 mining projects that have required an EES in Victoria, only one has ever been stopped by the government. Kelbar's dream to have its mine quickly rubber-stamped through the EES process has hit a brick wall of public opposition, and a formidable community group called Mine Free Glenallerdale has formed in Bairnsdale to fight the mine. And tonight, hundreds of concerned residents arrive at the East Gippsland Shire Chambers to support their councillors in a vote to formally oppose the project. Kelbar has 5 friends on the 9-person council, but tonight 2 of those have not turned up for the vote. Councillor Jackson Roberts wrote the motion opposing the mine.
The motion will not stop the EES from going ahead. However, it sends a clear message to our state and federal representatives. The community does not want this mine.
You're looking at 30 to 50% of the fresh produce going to the markets come from the Linno Flats. I just can't believe they're going to try and put a mine in this site.
So let's just put a little bit of monazite, a little bit of thorium. If a mineral sands mine was to proceed at Glenallerdale, this may be what most East Gippslanders will drink when they turn on the tap.
Time is running out. Our future is in your hands.
Kelbar's CEO, Victor Hugo, was the only person from the gallery to speak in support of the mine, threatening the council with legal consequences if they dared to pass the motion.
Councillors, I respectfully request that you consider your legal position.
I will put the motion before you. All those in favour? All those against? Motion is carried. 4-3.
The council voted 4-3 to oppose the mine, sending a strong warning to the state government that Kelbar's mine does not enjoy community support. And if it tries to force it through, it could turn public opinion against the entire mining industry at a time when the state government is trying to grow the sector. But Kelbar didn't stop, and behind the scenes they began a dirty tricks campaign to influence local politics and reverse the council's vote. A few weeks after the meeting, a strange letter appeared in the town's right-wing newspaper. Apparently written by the business community, it warned the local economy could collapse if the mine wasn't approved.
A letter appeared in the Bairnsdale Advertiser. Did Kelbar author the letter?
We were involved in drafting the letter, but that letter was a letter that ultimately all those people signed in agreement to.
4 months later, Kelbar's 5 supporters on council made their move, forcing a vote on a motion to reverse council's opposition to the mine.
The community is extremely disappointed that, having been through this process of a decision having been made on behalf of the community and the council to oppose the mine, that we now find ourselves in a situation of having to revisit that decision.
We think that this will have a huge adverse impact on the natural environment, so that's why we're here tonight.
There are concerns raised about radiation being emitted from disturbed mineral sands, the dust that's going to be created, the huge amounts of trucks up and down the roads.
We want you to consider the fact that you are taking a gamble with the future of the younger generation. Please don't turn our beautiful garden estate into a mining estate.
Controversial ex-mayor Joe Rotino is a National Party influencer and supporter of Kelbar. Joe dismisses the community and blames the opponents of the mine for a list of human disasters.
3 minutes is up.
Simply put, emotional and reactive type thinking is our System 1 type of our brain working, and has been blamed for such disasters as Chernobyl reactor disaster, the Apollo spaceship disasters, and most recently the global financial crisis.
Kelbar CEO Victor Hugo told the councillors to ignore the concerns of the public who elected them and instead rely on Kelbar's EES for all their decisions.
We strongly encourage you to allow the statutory process to run its course, evaluate the evidence, and properly investigate and consider the expressed views of the whole community before you advocate a position. Thank you.
Councillor Marianne Peltz also supports the mine. She owns a large log trucking company that could profit from carrying Kelbar's ore, but she's refused to abstain from the vote.
So the bottom line for me as to why I wanted to rescind this motion was the community's opposition to the proposed mineral sands mining proceeding in the East Gippsland region. Who is to say that mineral sand mining is not appropriate to be done in Tubbut, Genoa or any of our other outer regions or any other region? This issue is purely a site-specific concern.
That's not fair. It's not
Rubbish.
Excuse me, I asked for you to be quiet in the back because we've listened to you now for an hour and a half and you've had your say. My vote around the table actually counts.
Take that back.
Deliver it.
Please stop calling out.
I've got a lot to say, thank you, and you can all be quiet while I say it.
Ben Buckley's my name and I'm a councillor in East Gippsland Shire. And there's a bit of conflict of interest within our own administration in relation to the mine. I do oppose the mine at this stage. There's plenty of other places they could do it that are not as sensitive as this Lindenow Flats issue.
There will be jobs lost in our community as a result of this mine. Those farms will no longer need shearers. They won't need stock agents. They won't need fertiliser. So no one has considered that. So when you start talking about the few jobs that the mine creates, just consider those people who actually will be out of work as a result, and they will be local people. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against?
All of Kelbar's efforts paid off, with its supporters winning the vote 5-4, removing council's opposition to the mine and leaving the community alone to fight the company. All across Victoria, there are communities that have suffered the consequences of mining, and one of those is Canagog, a small farming community in the southern Wimmera, just west of the Grampian Mountains, with the beautiful Glenelg River flowing close by. Between 2006 and 2012, Iluka Resources operated the Douglas Mineral sand mine here, and this community soon discovered that the promises made in the mine's environmental effects process mean nothing once mining begins. Ian Ross and his wife run a large sheep station here at Canagog. They, like most in their community, initially accepted the proposed mine because the promises made by the company in its environmental effects statement seemed like a win-win for the community.
Hot yesterday, 40 degrees, will be the same today, so it's good that it's early Friday.
Hello, testing. How are we going? The mine arrived here at Canagog and Talangatuk back in about 2001, I think exploration started, when the EES went through. We were a community of 20 or 30 families, but we had a tennis club, there was a kids club. It was what you call a viable, I suppose, and a fairly happy community. And then the mine came along, and with purchasing of farms, we lost families, and there's still 3 or 4 vacant houses now. And some of the key leaders of the community left because their farms were bought out.
Iluka promised the mine would bring wealth and jobs to the nearby town of Balmoral, but they were short-lived.
During the mine, Balmoral was when the hotel was flourishing, and the takeaway food place did a lot more business. But now that the mine's closed and the personnel have gone, it really hasn't done anything for Balmoral long-term at all.
The company that developed the Douglas mine proposal was called Basin Minerals, and its 2 main directors are the same speculators who established Kelbar Resources and the Bairnsdale Fingerboards mine. The Basin Minerals EES promised the Canagog community world's best practice mining, with the land restored to farming just 3 years after mining had begun. with the soils more fertile and productive than ever. But Basin Minerals, like Kelbar Resources, was just a front. And once the mine got government approvals, its owners suddenly sold out to the giant multinational mining company Iluka Resources. Under Victoria's rigged mining law, the environmental conditions a planning minister puts on a mine at the end of an EES process are not legally enforceable. And once mining began, the Canagog community soon discovered that all the promises made was simply bypassed by Iluka with the approval of the Victorian Government Mining Department regulator.
We were promised world's best practice mining with a moving footprint with only 1.5 kilometres open at one time. We got the opposite in the end. There was 14.5 kilometres of pit open when the mine completed. No restoration at all had been done. So the agricultural land has lost production, we've lost families, and it's lost income to the area from agriculture because the pit hasn't been restored.
Graham Robertson is also a farmer at Canagog. In the mid-2000s, Iluka Resources mined straight through Graham's farm, but cut costs during the mine rehabilitation. And now, 12 years after mining ended, this farm is still sinking down into the backfilled mining voids.
Iluka came to me, they wanted to do some sort of a deal. At that time, I didn't want anything to do with the mine, but I had no option. I was basically told if I didn't comply to what they asked for, that I would probably end up in strife legally. So I decided I'll have to go with it. They wanted to buy my farm. They didn't offer me any more than anybody else would have offered. My family were only young when this happened. The youngest was 6, their son, their 2 daughters were sort of 10, 11. And they grew up for probably 7 or 8 years, not in our own house. Iluka took us away from our house. We couldn't live here. It was a 24/7 dust bowl.
The shareholders of Iluka Resources made over $1.5 billion profit during the 8 years of mining.
The land rehabilitation is when Iluka ran out of money because the shareholder says, we've got our money, we don't want to spend any money on rehab. Of all the 50 hectares or whatever it was of pit, there's probably about 7 or 8 hectares, 7 hectares, that was compacted properly originally with the big scrapers, and the rest has sunk. Every year it's got worse, and it's up to 1 metre deep, I would suggest. That's about ground level there from what I'm looking at. I reckon it's cost me $1 million in loss of production and stress and everything else.
At one point, Graham returned to his farm, only to discover Iluka was illegally dumping thousands of tonnes of radioactive monazite just hundreds of metres from his family's home.
And there was a grey haze blowing over my house yard. I got my lawyer out, he came and had a look, and we both stood there looking over the edge of this grey haze coming off this monazite. $1 million later, they carted the crap out. This is after it blew all over my house yard that I was to walk back into one day with my family and live happily ever after. If I knew what I know now, I would have gone to jail over it. I would have spoken up. I would have done everything to stop it. It was a disgrace.
Mineral sand mining produces the dangerous radioactive waste mineral monazite. The mine's EES promised that monazite would be returned to the mining pits and buried at the bottom, making it safer for the local community than before mining began. But in 2009, Iluka was given approval by the Mining Department regulator, without the community's knowledge, to ignore the EES and dump millions of tonnes of monazite from its processing plant and its other mines in Victoria and South Australia into this one giant hole at Canagog, the now infamous Pit 23. And when the Horsham Shire Council tried to stop this waste dump, Iluka and the government took them to court and won. And today, Pit 23 is still not rehabilitated. It is leaching radioactive water into the groundwater aquifer that connects to the heritage-listed Glenelg River.
So now we have a Pit 23 that is millions of tonnes of material of low-level radioactivity. It emits radon gas, thoron gas, and has elevated risk for our community. So what we're promised is less, what we know is more risk.
Honestly, if you can stop a mine, just go for it. Just get as many people on a line and just try to prove your point. No one really helped us. We're just a small community.
We were too kind and too polite, like most rural people are. They try to work gently and quietly with people. But you're working with a pack of bastards, you've got to stand up to them. Yeah.
And do you believe them?
I don't believe anything they say.
At Bairnsdale, Kelbar Resources is recycling the same broken promises its directors gave to the Canigalt community 20 years before.
If you do it right, within 3 to 5 years of one part of the land being mined, you can have things that are rehabilitated and more beneficial to farmers, more productive, and in some places have greater biodiversity values.
Hi Peter, I'm Paul Gibson-Roy. I'm the Manager of Ecological Restoration with Kelbar Resources, and my main role in this project is overseeing the vegetation rehabilitation of the mine.
Greenwashing is a PR strategy used by mining companies to convince the public that their damaging operations are good for the environment. And Kelbar claims that despite its mine destroying 20 square kilometres of land, it will be good for the environment because they are going to replant just 200 hectares of native grass.
The rehabilitation process is continuous, so as the mine progresses, as soon as they get to the end of the void, we start refilling and then rehab starts after it.
Within the Kelbar mine footprint, there are 2 large areas of mature native forest. The largest of those, at 40 hectares, is on the Coleman's property.
The early people who settled this area left big pockets of bush like this, so you've got these beautiful big old trees. You can see all the wear marks on the bark from where the various gliders running up and down. This will all be dug out, this will all become a hole in the ground. And in theory, at some point somebody will supposedly rehabilitate it to some state, but we don't know what state that will be.
Can you leave those ecologically important areas of mature forest and mine around them?
Well, I guess in terms of the mine itself, essentially the mine footprint has to be excavated to get that mineral, and that's just standard mining practice.
The company Kelbar paid to write the required ecological report for its EES is a big favourite of the mining industry and corporations. The report has many deficiencies and only surveyed 75% of the total mine area, leaving out the largest and most ecologically significant area of mature forest, which occurs here on the Coleman's property.
He's at least 5 metres in circumference. Kelbar don't say anything about our patches of native vegetation on the property. They haven't counted the trees in their tally of number of trees that are going to be removed from the project. There's more trees in this single stand than there is in Kelbar's entire tally.
In addition to destroying all the large forest reserves across the 20 square kilometre mine site, Kelbar will also demolish over 700 ancient heritage trees left by the original European settlers 150 years ago. These trees have huge ecological importance and are culturally significant to the traditional owners, the Gunai-Kurnai people, who also formally oppose the mine.
So what we're proposing to do with a lot of those removed trees is to actually retain that wood and perhaps leave it in our rehab as a habitat feature, flip it upside down and allow raptors to roost on it.
Kelbar justifies the destruction of 200 hectares of native forest and thousands of trees across its mine site by using a legalised scam called vegetation offsets, where an ecologically important area of native vegetation can be legally destroyed by a developer, then offset by renting some intact vegetation somewhere else.
All that's been accounted for in offsetting mechanisms, so all those, every sort of ecological asset on the footprint has been accounted and has to be then met in an offset.
In theory, the state government has this policy of no net loss of vegetation, but if you preserve this patch in order to knock down that patch, you've still lost net vegetation. You've preserved it somewhere, and that somewhere doesn't have to be anywhere near the area that gets knocked down.
Victoria's environmental effects law is unique in Australia because it's not illegal for a developer like Kelbar or its consultants to intentionally lie and mislead during an EES process, including in their technical reports, media comments, public consultation, or even in the evidence they give to the coming inquiry panel that will advise the Minister. In contrast, that's a serious criminal offence in all other Australian states and territories.
My job is to make sure that we are working in accordance and in compliance with the law, and that's what we are doing.
Tetra Tech, complex world, clear solutions.
Coffee Tetra International is the multinational consultancy coordinating Kelbar's environmental effects statement. For 5 years, Coffee has been conducting public engagement sessions with the community. At these events, Kelbar's paid agents attempt to convince the public that the mine will have a positive impact on their lives.
Honestly, you have stuffed our lives for years now. We're over it. Do you even know how many people are going to be listening to your mess for the rest of their good life? Or do you even care? Do you care?
In my view, I believe it's about the benefit that this project will bring to this region.
Victor Hugo stands to make a fortune if he can get the mine approved. Kelbar paid him $1.3 million in 2019, and he owns 2.5 million Kelbar shares. Kelbar has spent huge sums trying to buy community support. It's employed Vesna Rendulik, a mining industry public relations expert. She specialises in altering the public perception of mining projects.
We are part of the community. We are embedded here in the main street. I also look after sponsorships and our sponsorship and donations program for the community.
Kelbar has tried to divide and conquer the local community. It's spent hundreds of thousands filling the local media with company propaganda and by paying huge cash handouts to local sporting clubs and events. This is a standard technique of mining companies, getting clubs hooked on the money to buy their silence and support. Kelbar has also exaggerated the promise of employment as a strategy to divide the community, claiming it will create 200 jobs when comparable mines only employ 50. Kelbar has tried to greenwash its image, erecting huge billboards along highways to con the public into thinking that its Fingerboards mine is really a wind farm. And missing from all this glossy spin and propaganda are images that show the real environmental impact of a mineral sand mine. And somehow Kelbar has influenced the local councils, resulting in letters being sent to numerous residents who dared to display anti-Kelbar signs. The letters falsely claim the signs breach local council codes and threaten to hit the offenders with $1,000 fines.
The Wellington Shire have asked us to remove both signs. As someone has complained, could you tell us who that might be, Victor Hugo?
Yes, I can. We wrote letters to both the Wellington Shire and to the East Gippsland Shire, suggesting that the shires basically enforce their own bylaws.
Isn't that dirty tricks?
It's the public's right to put up signs provided they are doing so within the law. We operate within the law and we think that others should do so as well.
But for 5 months during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, council enforcement officers seem to have forgotten the rules for this huge sign displayed on Bairnsdale's main street. It promoted a kooky but dangerous COVID-19 conspiracy theory, encouraging people not to wear masks because alien lizard people are really behind COVID-19. The sign suddenly vanished after we wrote to council asking if they employed a Kelbar supporting conspiracy theorist. Stawell is another Victorian town where the mining department regulator has put human safety and the environment at great risk. Stawell has a long history of gold mining, with its boom ending in 1920. Then in the 1980s, Western Mining Corporation reopened the old Stawell gold mine, claiming it would find billions in gold that the old-timers had missed. And it built a massive tailing dam to dump millions of tonnes of dangerous heavy metal waste produced in the mine processing plant. But the gold didn't exist, and Western Mining Corporation soon sold out. And since then, the Stawell gold mine has changed hands many times. And after each new company had done some token mining and taken its investors' money, it would sell out to a new company to escape the cost of rehabilitating the mine site. And during all this, Victoria's mining department regulator has allowed the tailings dam to grow larger and larger. It's now a massive, mud-filled, toxic mountain, 35 metres high and covering an area of 150 hectares. It contains over 25 million tonnes of carcinogenic heavy metal waste, plus thousands of illegally dumped chemical drums and petrochemical effluent. The tailings dam walls have been built up using the dangerous upstream technique, now outlawed in most developed countries. This is the exact same method that failed catastrophically during the 2019 Brumadinho mine disaster in Brazil. Here, the collapse of a tailing dam wall sent a tsunami of toxic mud surging down a river valley, killing 600 people and devastating the environment for 120 kilometres downstream. Alan Cooper worked at the Stawell gold mine for 28 years. His responsibilities included the safety of the tailings dam. He's now concerned that a huge leak beneath the dam wall is threatening to collapse the entire structure.
Do you have concerns about the safety of the dam?
Yes. It was built on granite sand and they never ever found the bottom rock mattress. There's rock mattresses everywhere around here, but in the main part of the bank of the highest part is a creek bed and it's all granite sand all the way up, and we've dug down 6 metres in the granite sand itself and never found the bottom.
Alan Cooper's concerns were mirrored in an independent report that warned that the tailing dam was in danger of collapse because the cyanide waste it contains may be dissolving the clay foundations of the dam wall. The report has since been hidden by the mining regulator, which has now licensed a new mining company to raise the wall even higher. This will allow even more waste to be pumped into the already overloaded structure. Many communities live downstream from the tailings dam, and there is no emergency evacuation plan in place. The quiet farming life that Michelle Mulvaney's family once enjoyed came to an end when the tailing dam was constructed.
How long have you had the view of the tailings dam out of the kitchen window for?
Oh, since they put it there 30 years ago. So it's gradually, as you can see that line out there near the telegraph pole, that's probably the first bank. We used to have lovely views of the Black Range out there.
Do you miss those views you used to have?
Yeah, I do, but it's been a long time since the banks eventually crept to that level. But yeah, that's not sort of the reason why we built here to, have a lovely idyllic type life, build our farming enterprise and to raise our family, one day retire and then hopefully leave it to our children. But, today we'd happily walk away if we could. Just up here you can get a good look from the tailings dam. That's the dam, and you can see how there's been a new bank put on over there, where it's just the browny clay colour, and then below that you can see some green. Well, that's some of the dust suppressant they use.
The Mulvaney farmhouse is only 180 metres from the tailings dam wall, but under Victoria's biased mining law, people with the misfortune of having a mine move in next door have no legal rights to compensation for the loss of their property value or for the impact on their business or health. And each summer on hot windy days, dust blown from the surface of the tailing dam covers the Mulvaney property in carcinogenic heavy metals, including arsenic, cyanide, cadmium, chromium, lead and dangerous fine silica.
So in summer, if you get a bad southerly wind and you get all the dust off the bank, a southwest rings, it comes right across from the other side of the dam, right across, and comes across our property. Sometimes to the point where, you've had to come inside and get out of it because it stings your face and you get reactions to it.
People living in Stawell have a 25% greater chance of contracting colorectal cancer than other Australians. And arsenic, which is a known cause of this cancer, blows off the tailings dam and is pumped out of these mine shaft ventilation shafts located in the residential areas of the town.
And does that dust fall onto your roof and then you collect rainwater off your roof?
Yes, we do collect rainwater off the roof.
Are you worried about drinking the water?
We are, but I don't know what you can do about it. It's sort of a bit of a moot point, really. You either move away and just walk away, or you stay here and hope nothing happens to you in the future.
Can a single family fight a very wealthy mining company?
Of course not. No, it's difficult. It's just something that you can't really, you don't have the resources to do it. So, to put yourself through that, and then you'd probably lose everything.
Yeah.
So you've got to draw the line somewhere.
Although the Stawell gold mine has never made a profit, the mining regulator continues to licence its operation, because if mining stops, the site will then need to be rehabilitated. And then the public will discover that the government's mining regulator has only collected a paltry $5.8 million from all the companies that have mined here to cover the cost to rehabilitate the mine site. But the true cost to rehabilitate this huge mine and make its tailings dam safe for 1,000 years is estimated to be well over $300 million. And it's the Victorian taxpayer who will carry that cost, not the mining industry. Mine regulation in Victoria is managed by a department called the Earth Resources Regulator. In 2020, the public finally saw the corruption and incompetence of this agency when the Victorian Government Auditor-General released a bombshell report. Mining companies are required to restore the environment when mining ends. They pay the government a rehabilitation bond to cover the costs in case they go bust and run away. It's the regulator's role to set the size of those bonds and ensure rehabilitation takes place. But that's not happening. Instead, the regulator is illegally setting those bonds far below the real cost of rehabilitation. This encourages a mining company to go bankrupt and forfeit its bond rather than sticking around to pay the much higher cost of rehabilitating its mine. Here's some examples. The Costerfield mine, currently in operation. Bond paid for rehabilitation, $3.3 million. Estimated actual cost of rehabilitation, $60 million. The Canadian-owned Fosterville mine. Profit made, over $2 billion. Rehabilitation bond paid, $6.7 million. Estimated actual cost of rehabilitation, over $300 million. The Auditor-General found the mining regulator has acted illegally by losing vital financial records showing which mines have been rehabilitated and the amount of bonds repaid. Although it's illegal for a company to abandon a mine in Victoria, no company directors have ever been prosecuted by the regulator. There are hundreds of recent abandoned mines across Victoria, and the billion-dollar cost to rehabilitate them all will now fall on the taxpayer. This type of mining corruption is now playing out in the town of Bendigo. 20 years ago, the company Bendigo Mining spun the familiar yarn that billions in gold awaited discovery in the old mines beneath the city. And with government endorsement, it conned $300 million from gullible investors to build the new mine. When Mary Markey discovered the mine was coming to her suburb of Kangaroo Flat, and just 500 metres from her home, she joined her community in a 20-year-long fight against the mine and the corrupt mining department regulator. Before mining began, the company released its 10,000-page environmental effects statement, but the community was given just 30 days to read and respond.
These are the documents that we have to read before the EES process. We can't say that these reports are wrong if the consultants say, well, you're not going to hear the noise or this is going to happen, because we're not experts and we can't afford to hire experts. During the EES process, the panel makes recommendations which go to the minister. The minister agrees, and then they are put into our work plan. Now, if this work plan and the conditions imposed was followed, as it should be, by the management of the mining company, plus the regulators, the community would not have any problems. However, they bring in things called work plan variations, of which we had over 30.
And those 30 work plan variations, approved by the regulator, gradually removed the conditions laid down by the minister in the environmental effects statement that was supposed to protect the community. They allowed the company to conduct processing operations just hundreds of metres from people's houses, 24 hours a day, without a break, with the noise, dust and vibration so bad that it forced residents to abandon their family homes and move away.
My community suffered terribly. Look, at least 6 families had to sell out to the mining company because they couldn't cope any longer. We had people, couples on the verge of divorce because of the stress. I mean, you have no idea how much pressure is put on people when a mining company decides to pop up in their community.
After just 6 years of operations, Bendigo mining collapsed. The gold was not there. The investors lost their money and all the workers got sacked.
There were about 230 people employed there. Now, they were just as devastated when they lost their jobs. The community that had invested in it were devastated. My community that had suffered all those years of mining were devastated. So it's not a win-win. What has to be weighed is, what is the value of this land, or this area, or this community that we're going to sacrifice for the possibility of finding gold? Got to balance. It hasn't balanced well.
After Bendigo Mining collapsed, the mining regulator should have cancelled its mining licence and seized its remaining $30 million to pay for the mine's rehabilitation. Instead, the regulator let the company's owners do a runner and sell off the mine to a dodgy $2 company called GBM Krolkopic, which had no money or assets. This deal, which was probably illegal under the Mining Act, was approved by the mining minister based on advice she received from the CEO of the mining regulator. When we requested that advice under Freedom of Information, the nervous regulator refused to release it.
Well, passing on the mines means if the company thinks there's not enough gold in the mine, so they'll sell it down to another company for less money, and the other company has a try and no, there's not that much, they will pass it down, sell it to another company, and down it goes until there's nothing left.
The minister guaranteed the worried community that in just 2 years the mine's new owner would rehabilitate the mine's dangerous arsenic waste ponds. Carcinogenic dust blowing off these ponds threatens neighbouring communities. But after 5 years and 4 mining ministers later, still nothing has been done.
The problem with arsenic is it's a known carcinogen. It's associated with at least 6 cancers. When the water dries out, the sediment that is left, it's a very fine sediment. It can be picked up by the wind and spread as dust. Arsenic is a cumulative toxin. It can be ingested, such as any food grown in the area. It can be inhaled from the dust itself, so it will be drunk with any water. There's no reticulated water out here, so everyone's reliant on rainwater tanks. Babies in the uterus that are exposed to arsenic have a higher risk of cancer throughout their life.
Just 2 years after the mining regulator allowed GBM Krolkopic to buy the mine, the dodgy company was shut down by the Australian Stock Exchange for trading whilst insolvent.
The future of gold mining in Bendigo is uncertain for GBM Gold.
The Earth Resources regulator was then forced to admit that the company had no money for rehabilitation and cancelled its mining licence.
They don't have sufficient finance to fund their rehabilitation work and mining activities, and therefore I've made the decision to refuse to renew their licences.
As this mining swindle becomes known, the nervous regulator won't say who's going to pay to rehabilitate these contaminated mine sites at Bendigo. It claims to hold a $5 million rehabilitation bond, but the real cost is estimated to be well over $100 million.
And there's 600,000 tonnes of arsenic-laden sand sitting there, not being covered, not being used. I mean, this is ridiculous for this to be allowed to happen.
So with your mine here, is there actually a restoration bond sitting somewhere adequate?
Well, I hope so, but who knows? Because if there's not, well, the government is in big trouble because it'll fall on the taxpayers to do rehabilitation, if ever. But at my age, I'm not going to be here long enough to see this rehabilitated. There's been more tears in this room, believe me. It's just not fair.
Back at Glenelladale, Kelbar has been telling the local community for 7 years that its mine would include a giant tailing dam. This will be built in the catchment of the Mitchell and Avon River systems and contain millions of tonnes of heavy metals and radioactive mine waste. Downstream from the dam site is the unique Perry River chain of ponds system.
Well, Honeysuckle Creek, which is a part of the Perry and Providence Ponds chain of ponds system, is incredibly unique in Southeast Australia now. It's a rare form of waterway that used to be quite common across southeastern Australia pre-colonisation. What they are is a beautiful little oval or teardrop-shaped pond, then there's like a grassy area, then it goes down into another pond. They're an incredible water resource for birds and animals, turtles, and those ponds actually hold water throughout the dry times. They're incredibly ecologically significant.
The West Gippsland Catchment Authority manages the Perry River system. Its scathing submission to Kelbar's EES warned that the collapse of the tailings and sediment dams upstream could destroy the unique chain of ponds.
What you would have is a massive wall of tailings, mud and water come tearing down this system, scouring out the channel between the ponds, totally infilling the ponds, on downstream into the Perry system and into Lake Wellington. There would be a massive ecological disaster.
Kelbar has ignored the environmental impact of a dam collapse by simply claiming that because the dams will be built to Australian standards, they can't collapse. But human engineering fails all the time, and each year there are 20 serious tailings dam disasters at mines across the world. Kelbar's mine will take 500 acres of Matt Stevenson's family farm.
Our family are in opposition to the mineral sands mine. The concerns that we have is that when they go running for the hills in 2 or 3 years' time, or maybe it extends out to 5 or 6, 10 years' time, we believe that the rehabilitation of this land won't take place. So the rehabilitation will be the last thing that they consider in their plans. The first thing will be the extraction of the minerals, the last thing will be rehabilitation. And the Victorian taxpayer will be left holding the baby when it comes to the expenses incurred in rehabilitation, if they actually happen at all.
Kelbar's environmental effects statement only contains a vague description of how it intends to rehabilitate the mine site. It describes bulldozing around the sand, gravel and soil dug out during mining to reform the original gully and escarpment landscape, then spreading mulch and gravel and planting vegetation. But government agencies are not convinced, with the East Gippsland CMA warning that Kelbar risks leaving the landscape unproductive, unstable and subject to significant erosion issues for generations to come.
Kelbar's plans to rehabilitate this landscape will be almost like trying to put back a jigsaw puzzle with a blindfold on. And what they haven't anticipated is something that we locals all know, and that is that we are going to have significant periods of drought into the future where they may not be able to water plants that they've planted or pastures they've put in. There's not going to be the water available. So how are those things going to grow and hold that soil together? And in those further rain events after that, when we do actually get some rain, it's going to wash it all away.
The mine requires 20 sediment retention dams to be built across the steep gullies on the site and maintained for up to 50 years. These are essential to prevent heavy metal-laden mud and mine sediment flowing into the nearby rivers and lakes.
We're standing in the Simpson Gully. This is one of 3 gullies that run from the Mitchell River up into the project area. As you can see, if you don't manage the land properly, you do get erosion. So somewhere in this area, we haven't quite got to the detail of where, we will have an appropriately sized water catchment dam. Any land that we've disturbed and there's water that runs from it will be captured in these dams.
Well, what about if there is an exceptional situation where the dam wall is breached and the whole dam is washed away and everything that's being contained behind it ends up...
Well, yeah, so then you've obviously have a catastrophic failure, and what we intend to do is design the dams to ensure that they're engineered appropriately such that there is no catastrophic failure. So,
But East Gippsland is hit by massive rainfall events called East Coast Lows. These can raise the creeks on the mine site by 2 metres in just a few hours. Flash floods from these storms will quickly overtop Kelbar's soft, earth-walled sediment dams, leading to a cascading series of dam failures along the gullies on the mine site, sending millions of tonnes of contaminated mine sediment surging down the Mitchell and Perry rivers and bringing environmental disaster to the Gippsland lakes. Sediment from a dam collapse would enter the Gippsland lakes here at Jones Bay, smothering the sea grass beds that support the most important remaining fish spawning ground in the lakes. The toxic sediment would spread across the 370 square kilometre lake system, contaminating the food chain with heavy metals and flocculants, and would be impossible to clean up. Kelbar has also ignored the economic impact of a mine disaster on the region's huge tourism industry. This generates $200 million a year and is dependent on these lakes and rivers. The wetlands of the Gippsland Lakes are supposed to be protected by the federal government under the International Ramsar Convention. But in 2015, the government handed these responsibilities to the state.
There'll be no wrecking.
So now the impact of Kelbar's mine on these lakes will only be assessed under Victoria's weak environmental effects law. The town of Bairnsdale is on the Mitchell River, and following it upstream for 30 kilometres, all the way to Glenelladale, are the highly fertile Mitchell River Flats. These are some of the most productive farms in Victoria, employing 2,000 people with 40 trucks leaving the district each day. Most of the farmers here oppose Kelbar's mine because it will compete for the same limited river water that they depend on to irrigate their crops. John Hines' family owns a large vegetable farm here on the Mitchell River Flats. The farm is only 500 metres from the boundary of Kelbar's proposed mine.
That's my wife in that tractor there.
That's your wife driving?
Yeah, we get out and do a lot of work ourselves. Me and my brother Graham came down here on the Linno Flats in September '77. We didn't know much about growing crops or anything, but we had to learn pretty quick. I know the first year we grew half an acre of broccoli and we thought we were playing buggery, half an acre. We went on to up to 500 acres a year and that 5 million plants a year of broccoli alone. We're standing on the banks of the Mitchell River here. The proposed mineral sands mine's up behind me in the hills here, which is probably 400 to 500 metres back from the river. They will be making 5 mine voids, a kilometre long by 500 metres wide by around 40 metres deep, and they are big mine voids. To put that in that area is totally unsuitable. That tractor's just working ground ready for planting today, and the planters will come along soon. They'll be loading up plants at the moment, and they'll come and plant broccoli today, and we'll water them in tonight. We do a lot of watering on the flats here. We grow broccoli and collies, cabbage, sweet corn. We do rely on the river very heavily.
Access to the water of the Mitchell River will either make or break Kelbar's proposed mine. Over the past 7 years, the company has lied about the mine's water consumption to reduce opposition from the vegetable industry. It claims the mine would only use 3 billion litres a year. But in 2020, Kelbar was forced to admit the real figure will be over 5 billion litres. That's half of what the entire horticulture industry is currently licensed to take from the Mitchell River each year. But the water level of the Mitchell River is dropping as climate change takes effect. And according to government data, the river flow has now fallen 12% since 1975, while rainfall is predicted to drop another 4% by 2030 and continue dropping after that. So even maintaining the current level of irrigation might be impossible in the near future. Kelbar plans to secure the mine's water needs by outbidding the vegetable industry when the government auctions off the last available 6 billion litres of water licences for the Mitchell River.
The important thing is if whoever it is that is eligible for those licences, whoever is prepared to pay the most will get the water.
And because Kelbar will have millions of dollars of investors' funds to spend, it will get the water. But the vegetable farmers believe that the government has broken its promise made over a decade ago to set aside that winter flow water to allow for the expansion and drought proofing of the vegetable industry and not for the use of a new mine.
Just a terrible crop here, up here is better. This is the beautiful Mitchell River, the Heritage River. We get irrigation water, we get the town drinking water. We can't afford to have the water taken from our industry. We're all developed our markets, our beautiful fresh green vegetables, and we've been here for 50 or 60 years growing veggies. It's very important to the state. We just cannot afford to have that affected in any way.
With climate change increasing, there will be times when the river is too low to supply the mine. So Kelbar has a plan B to save the project. They intend to extract huge volumes of water from the underground aquifers. But this is the same water the farmers use in dry summers to irrigate their crops.
The river's dropping very quickly, and if we don't get rain in November, December, there could be total ban on the river by Christmas quite easily if we don't get rain soon.
What will that mean? You'll have to rely more on your boil water, will you, in summer?
Yes, if the river goes total ban once again, we'll have to rely on our boil water, our Latrobe Valley aquifer water. If that mine takes 1,000 megalitres out of it, if it drops to the point of not being able to be used, we'll have no secure water set up at all.
There are many other local farmers who depend on this groundwater resource to keep their farms viable.
It's an old Australian Southern Cross. I transported it here back in 2011 to do exactly the job it's doing. It'll produce probably 450 litres an hour in a 20-kilometre breeze. And there's no shortage of wind here, and there's no shortage of sand here, but boy, is there a shortage of water. We need to have water for stock, and reliable water is groundwater. And this aquifer has been as reliable as an anvil ever since it was first used back about early 1900s. Once the mine begins and we're running short of water, we know damn well from past experience on other aquifers that they do not say no to big business. That's the concern. Are we going to be fair and equitable? Are we going to make sure that some tin Lizzie farmer gets his allocation of water? So yes, without the water, there is no farming enterprise here. No.
Australia is like a colony of the mining industry. Its money and influence has removed 4 recent prime ministers.
About sexism and misogyny by this man.
I'm ambitious for him.
Thanks, ScoMo. While it spent $100 million rigging our last federal election. Political bribes and influence dictate the laws and policies that destroy our communities and environment, while it funds the denial of climate change that's threatening Australia's future. And it gives us puppets instead of leaders.
I'm only shaking your hand if you give more funding to our RFS.
It stacks our politics, media and institutions with mining industry lackeys.
Why do we knock them down?
The mining oligarchs get rich plundering our natural resources, but pay almost no tax. And the miners get away with blowing up 40,000 years of Aboriginal heritage, then just say,
"Very sorry."
How good is mining? If we want our mining industry to be successful in the future, we must counter those noisy voices which want to shut you down. I've come as a pumpkin today.
After travelling 4 hours from Bairnsdale, Mine Freegal Allerdale has arrived at Parliament House to tell the politicians they oppose Kelbar's mine.
This mine is also only 350 metres from the Mitchell River, which is part of the Ramsar listed Gippsland Lake. So we're talking about tourism and we're talking about food, and food is fundamental to this economy.
Once upon a time, the National Party was called the Country Party, and it would have stood with the farmers against Kelbar's mine. But it's become known as the Mining Party, and it's losing seats in the bush to independents who stand up for their community. Its national office channels huge political donations from the mining industry into its state branches, and this buys the party's support for mining projects that destroy farms and communities.
How do you feel to support the farming families who will be forced to leave their farms should the mine get approved? How do you deal with that sort of an issue as a national representative?
Yeah, look, there's varying opinions in the community on this proposal. The reality of it is that the proponents have the right to develop a proposal. And whilst there are opinions both for and against in the community, there are a lot of people who are awaiting the outcome of the EIS process before they make a final determination on it. So I think that that's the balanced and appropriate course of action. It's a process that has to take place.
Tim Bull sits on the fence, hiding behind the EIS process when a mine threatens farms in his electorate, but doesn't hesitate to give support to his mates in the logging industry.
The timber mill.
When they come to Parliament asking for his help. The local MP didn't bother to come outside and meet with the farmers opposing Kelbar's mine when they came to Parliament House.
It appears we have to come to Melbourne to voice our concerns. We don't seem to be getting heard very well up home, so we'll come down here and we'll keep at it until we succeed. We won't give up in any way. No way.
The reason why we're all here today is that we want to send a strong message to our politicians. We want them to step up, recognise that this is an inappropriate place for a mine, and to step up and take action to stop this mine. Because we will not give up.
It's very hard to get the community involved because in our area, there might only be 1% of the population gets involved. They don't seem to care, and we've just got to try and make people aware that what's happening.
They're not going to be able to stop the dust, and they're going to use that much water to do it. And where they're going to get that water from when the veggie growers have already had to stop this because of the drought this year.
Do you think that there's a future threat to the vegetable industry from dust or future competition for water once the mine is underway? Does that concern you?
I certainly don't want any proponent extracting water in competition to the growers over the summer months, and I've made that very clear.
MP Tim Bull ignores Kelbar's plan to outbid the local vegetable farmers and grab the final allocation of Mitchell River water. That's the water needed to safeguard the future of the local horticulture industry as climate change intensifies.
The petition was lodged today in the Legislative Assembly, nearly 4,600 signatures. It's letting the state government know that the community is opposed to the mine and that they don't want it to proceed.
We will stop this mine. We will stop this mine.
We will stop this mine.
We will stop this mine.
Tonight in Bairnsdale, Kelbar will present its long-awaited Horticulture Impact Report to a packed public meeting attended by many of the vegetable farmers who'll be affected by the mine. Kelbar had been hiding the mine's impact on the vegetable industry for 6 years, until finally ordered to write this report by the EES advisory panel under pressure from the growers.
Yeah, really appreciate everyone's time for coming out and listening to what we've undertaken as part of this Hort Impact Assessment for this project. So a lot of bag leaf lettuce is probably the characteristic crop from the region.
Kelbar commissioned the consultants RMCG to write this report, and they got the whitewash they paid for, according to the audience. The report claims the mine would pose a low risk to the commercial interests of the vegetable industry, but it relies on Kelbar's data, and no independent research was done.
How can RMCG report findings when they haven't done any independent research? And we clearly demonstrated on a bean grower, you've designated June as major production. Why?
I represent one of 75% of the horticultural and viticultural businesses in the area. We do not agree that there will be a low risk of contamination. Our concerns have not been addressed, and the risks are far too high for the government to allow this mine to proceed.
RMCG's horticulture report was written by Clinton Muller and his workmate Doris Blazing in Tasmania. Neither of them bothered to visit the Bairnsdale horticulture area to prepare this report.
We are confident that agriculture and the mining can coexist.
I asked Clinton, have you seen the site out there? Have you been and inspected the site at all?
Not through this project, but I have been out to those sites.
You can't give a report if you don't come out and have a look. Like, to see the site and go around it and see where the river is, see where the crops are, it's very hard to write up and go modelling and all this business. And at the end of the day, I don't feel we can coexist with this mine. So, what's everyone think about that?
Kelbar's horticulture impact report also dismissed the serious health risk of radioactive dust blowing off the mine site and contaminating the surrounding land and dwellings. About 5% of this mineral sands deposit is the mineral monazite. And monazite contains the dangerous radioactive elements thorium and uranium. And 1 grain of monazite eaten on food or breathed in as dust can cause cancer in human beings. Just a few kilometres from the vegetable fields, Kelbar's mine will include massive stockpiles containing monazite, just like at this comparable mineral sand mine in Western Australia. And during hot, dry, windy weather, Kelbar would not be able to stop monazite-laden dust blowing off the mine site down into the vegetable crops below. Kelbar's radiation report claims, without scientific justification, that washing vegetables at home before eating will remove the risk of radioactive contamination.
Did you, when you did your study, go to, say, Safeways in Prahran, stand out the front and put a direct question to consumers of vegetable products? Would you buy a broccoli head from Lindenow if it contained radioactive monazite?
No, I don't think that's an appropriate question to ask in this instance.
Victoria's Mining Act treats farmers like obstructions, standing in the way of mining. That's the experience of the Alexander family, who own this highly productive farm, now on the boundary of Kelbar's mine. They'll have no right to compensation for the mine's impact on their lives and business. John Alexander is the 5th generation to farm this land. He returned home with his young family 10 years ago to work in partnership with his father Ken.
We feel the proximity will be downwind from the mine, and we'll have a lot of dust coming over to our farm and our dwellings where we live.
We are very concerned that our way of life here on the farm will be interrupted with a mining operation working next to us 24 hours of the day. My wife Judith and I are really concerned about the younger generation, John and his family, how their future will be impacted.
So I've lived here for nearly 45 years. In that time, Ken and I thought we would be living here, just us. And then 10 years ago, John came home with his wife Jess, and we now have 2 grandchildren down the road. Since John's been back, we have amazing future plans for this place, and that makes you now stop and think, do we go ahead with those plans? Because it might not work out at all.
The vision as a young farmer here, I'd love to be able to stay here and pass it on to my next generation of my children. To have a 6th generation living on the farm would be fantastic, but especially with the proximity from our farm to the mine, I feel there is doubts whether or not we'll be able to live where we're living, purely because of the dust and noise contamination.
Most mineral sand mines operate in sparsely populated areas, but within 3 kilometres of Kelbar's proposed mine, there are 81 homes and hundreds of residents. These will all be subjected to high levels of dust for the 20-year life of the mine. According to Kelbar's data, this dust will contain dangerous levels of cancer-causing compounds, including respirable silica, heavy metals and radioactive minerals, making these houses unsafe environments to live and raise children.
We feel very much on our own with this. We've been going to meetings and trying to find out all the information we can about the proposed mine. We do feel as though the government have left all of the public consultation to the mining company itself, who have a vested interest, and there's no one advocating on our behalf really.
As part of the EES approvals process, Kelbar must show that the level of dust reaching neighbouring properties will be kept below permitted levels. Stronger winds carry more dust, so to fudge the data and keep the wind speeds low, Kelbar placed its monitor in a corner of the mine site, sheltered behind a 4,000 hectare plantation. And because this monitor was broken a quarter of the time, Kelbar just made up the missing data.
At the moment there's no mine and the air quality is fine, which is hardly surprising. I would like to see how you decide that when the mine is there will still be no problem. Thank you.
We have done a very detailed assessment of air quality based on operating data that Kelbar have provided us with. To be honest, how else would we do it? Okay.
We do it ourselves! It's called garbage in, garbage out.
Kelbar's CEO claims the Victorian EPA is a strong regulator, and it will close the mine down if it breaches dust levels.
And if we do that, and we don't have to do it very frequently, we will be shut down by the EPA.
But the Victorian government has just hobbled the EPA by slashing 1/3 of its staff and appointing a government yes-man as its CEO, leaving the agency incapable of effectively regulating any industry.
Have you been satisfied with the quality of the studies that CalBar has released with its EES?
No, we really haven't been satisfied with any of their studies. We don't believe they're being done fair-mindedly. They have a bias towards the mining company. It doesn't take much common sense to realise if they're going to dig a dirty great big hole next to us, we're going to have a lot of disturbed soil and we'll be impacted by dust and noise, and it's just going to be a very unpleasant situation for us, especially if we have to move out. Suddenly you realise that your farm's not your farm anymore. It's can be impacted by an outside effect like a sand mine, and can turn your life upside down.
We might not be able to live here. Well, where do we live and who pays for where we live? Do we have to sell? It's all the uncertainty that we have to live with. Even though I didn't come from a farm, I have a huge attachment now to this place, and I never want to live anywhere else.
The issue I have, I've just come back from South Africa, and I was interested to hear that you were from South Africa, and I must say it scared me shitless. There's so much destruction going on there, and I hope these aren't the sort of qualities you're going to bring to good old Australia. I have no faith in this process. It is horrible, and I think it needs to be revisited before something like you guys are let loose in this place. CalBar, are you going to go forward with this program, this project? Are you guys going to mine it, or are you going to sell it to someone like the Chinese or something?
I cannot say. We will never sell because
Don't say anymore.
that is the nature of business.
After 7 years of searching, CalBar announced a foreign investor was buying out its troubled Fingerboards mine, a shady UK-based front company called Appian Capital Advisory. CalBar claims its project is worth $2.5 billion, but Appian would only pay $140 million for half, with an option to take over the entire project later. CalBar and Appian have set up a new $2 front company called CalBar Operations. This will help them avoid the responsibility of rehabilitating the mine or to pay for any environmental disasters that may arise. CalBar will not disclose who is really behind the Appian money, but there's a path leading straight to the giant Chinese government-owned company, Chinalco. And a Chinalco operative was installed onto the CalBar board of directors. Chinalco has a shocking environmental record and has faced numerous international prosecutions for dumping heavy metal waste into rivers and lakes. CalBar has refused to discuss its secretive relationship with Chinalco.
ABC Gippsland.
CalBar CEO Victor Hugo is with us now. Good morning.
Morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Have you signed an agreement with Chinalco in China, a company with a questionable environmental record?
Jonathan, whatever agreements we have, in our opinion, confidential, and I'm not going to make comment about what agreements we have.
Shortly after this, Victor Hugo sadly died. He was replaced as CalBar's CEO by a stiff-necked miner called Joseph Paterica. His previous job was manager of this controversial and highly destructive mineral sand mine in Senegal, West Africa. The operation involves expelling 10,000 farmers from their ancestral lands to make way for the mine. On September the 3rd, 2020, COVID rages, public gatherings are banned, and Victoria goes into total lockdown. The Planning Minister has chosen this moment for CalBar to release its long-awaited environmental effects statement.
The community now has 40 days to respond, but it's not enough time.
This is really a David and Goliath battle. Community gets 40 days compared to their 4 years.
CalBar's EES is a massive 11,000-page document, and the government has given the public only 40 days to read it all and respond. And this will be their last chance to influence the government's decision whether to approve or reject the mine. And with the library closed, the public must collect the massive document from CalBar's office. while being recorded by the company's cameras.
So do you think you can read all that in 40 days?
I will not be reading it all in 40 days. It is absolutely impossible. The whole process is unfair. We can't get together as a community to actually even discuss this. It's absolutely dreadful what the government have done.
Kalbar still needs to get rid of the farmers living on the mine site, and it's pursued that goal ruthlessly.
Why should a mining company have the legal power to throw someone off their land?
I think you're using the wrong words, throw people off their land. I mean, it's all about adequate compensation for the impact that we have.
So what about that letter that Kalbar sent to the Colemans, saying they'd be taken to the VCAT if they didn't sell Kalbar their land?
Oh, I'm not aware of that letter. No.
Recently we received a letter from Kalbar's lawyers basically saying that they offered to purchase our land. We haven't accepted that offer, so the letter says that they're going to take us to VCAT to make us sell our land.
Kalbar can't legally force the Colemans off their land until the EES is approved and the mining regulator has issued it a mining licence.
It was purely an effort to threaten us and intimidate us into selling the land to their price, to their time frame.
Kalbar only wants half the Colemans' 700-acre farm, including the area that supplies the entire property with permanent spring-fed water.
It would destroy the entire farm and leave us without a business. The whole process is extraordinarily biased towards the proponent, with very little protection for the, well, no protection for the landowners whatsoever.
On the day the EES was released, Kalbar began drilling mineral samples across the mine site. For 6 years it has spun a story of great riches, but now the foreign investor wouldn't pay up unless Kalbar could prove that the minerals were really in the ground. But Kalbar didn't want anyone to record what was going on. The day this was filmed, Kalbar's CEO, Joseph Patarika, tried to intimidate our producers. He claimed to have reported us to police for filming the drill rig and for asking questions about farmers affected by the mine. Patarika was lying. The Victoria Police have no record of his complaint. Kalbar's EES received 901 public submissions, all opposing the mine, with only 9 written in support. Kalbar now faces its final hurdle. It must front a 10-week public inquiry where its environmental effects statement will be scrutinised by a 4-person panel. The panel's report will then be considered by the Planning Minister before he decides the fate of the mine. A new Shire Council has since been elected in East Gippsland. Gone are Kalbar's 4 main supporters, including log truck boss Marianne Peltz and National Party influencer Joe Rotino. Then, to Kalbar's horror, the new council voted unanimously to oppose the mine and decided to engage technical experts to challenge Kalbar's claims at the coming inquiry. Back at the fingerboards, Kalbar's drill rig is working its way across the farms. Any owner who tries to stop it is threatened with court action. When the machines arrived at the Colemans farm after weeks of heavy rain, there was nothing the family could do to protect their waterlogged land. But after just 20 minutes, Kalbar's invasion force sank axle deep into the waterlogged paddock. And after 3 hours of digging and pulling, they eventually retreated. When the drill rig returned a week later, the Colemans were again threatened with court action if they allowed our cameras there to film it.
Give up his lease without a fight.
A few months before the hearings began, political deceit almost handed Kalbar the game. Sonia Buckley, a local wannabe politician, recently elected to council, suddenly backflipped on her election promise to stand with the farmers and oppose the mine.
You can also, of course, vote for me. Now, I want to support the farmers. He's opposed to this project. Join us, fight with us for your rights.
Sonia Buckley brought a motion to council to stop its lawyers and experts appearing at the inquiry by cutting their funding. This would have removed Kalbar's main opponent and almost guarantee the mine would be approved. But unfortunately for Kalbar, Buckley's efforts were defeated by just 1 vote.
I think that our government has started to oppress the people.
Finally, after 7 years, the ES inquiry began. Kelbar spent $10 million of its investor funds to employ an army of consultants and lawyers to overwhelm and bamboozle the inquiry. Against this, Mine Free Glenelladale relied on donations. It was represented by Environmental Justice Australia and an eminent barrister who donated her time. The East Gippsland Council was forced to spend about $1 million of ratepayers' funds. This is money the government should pay when it forces an EES process onto a community. Leading Kelbar's troops was the aggressive and expensive barrister Stuart Morris QC.
Now, it's been said that we have this big bad mining company coming into the area. It's not an invader. We make no apologies for the fact that Kelbar's investors will do well if this mine proceeds. That's how it should be, because they have taken the risk.
An EES inquiry is not a balanced investigation because the government doesn't produce any of its own experts to scrutinise a developer's claims. That role is forced onto the community and Shire. And although Victoria's Earth Resources Regulator would be regulating Kelbar's mine if it gets approved, they refused to show up at the inquiry to answer questions. Kelbar claimed that its 19 consultants were independent experts, but all their reports supported the mine. They were like an echo chamber, feeding in Kelbar's fake data, then borrowing from each other's reports to justify their own findings. Information that challenged Kelbar's agenda was just left out, including the effects of climate change over the 20-year life of the mine.
To be frank, we did not do a climate change assessment. So we used the historical data. So the answer to your question is, it is assuming that going forward that things stay the same as they are now.
There is no legal penalty for lying to the inquiry, and Kelbar's agent, Mr. Morris, even reminded the panel that Kelbar doesn't need to prove it's telling the truth.
The legal notion of an onus of proof is misplaced. We don't have any onus of proof. That's a notion that belongs to criminal and civil litigation, not to an environmental inquiry.
130 members of the public presented at the inquiry, including many of the affected farmers.
I was surprised that a project proposal like this ever got past day one.
We are a third-generation farming family. We strongly oppose this mine and all that Kelbar stands for. We have major concerns that we as farmers will be penalised because a large mining company may have the finances to obtain water rights that we have no access to.
Some people will believe that certain types of uses of water are morally superior to other uses. There's a certain romance about agriculture as being somehow morally superior. We do not have a system of allocating water based on who has the loudest voice or who we have the most sympathy for. And that's why if Kelbar is willing to pay more for water than, say, a farm or a horticultural enterprise, that's not something to cry about.
Kelbar's horticulture consultant falsely claimed they conducted a questionnaire where most farmers supported the mine.
Good morning, Dr. Blasing. My name is Emily Porter and I'm a barrister representing Mine Free Glenelladale. You've just mentioned that there was a questionnaire. There's no formal record that I can see in the impact assessment of the actual discussions that were held. It's extremely vague. There's absolutely nothing that gives transparency around the nature of these discussions.
Are you saying that we willingly...
Don't try to interpret what I'm getting at. I'm putting to you that there's nothing in the horticulture impact assessment that gives any transparency. Do you accept that?
We haven't hidden anything that anybody has said. That is not what
You're very defensive, Dr. Blasing. Have I said you've hidden anything?
I also wanted to point out that Kelbar themselves have been directly responsible for creating conflict. They've pitted people against each other in this divide and conquer mentality, taken advantage of struggling community groups by offering them money. And all of these actions have contributed to this conflict and disruption within our community.
It's not right to say that all of the community is against this project. The community is divided. That when a person comes along and says, I speak for the community, they in truth just speak for part of the community, because there are other parts of the community that are barracking for this project. They call it the silent majority.
Of the 130 members of the public presenting at the inquiry, only 4 supported Kelbar's project. Most of those have a commercial interest in the mine, including Karen and Peter Reid. They forgot to disclose they own 348,000 Kelbar shares.
I am representing the silent majority. The newly elected East Gippsland Shire Council has been captured by Greenies. They do not speak for the majority.
Kelbar's performance at the 6-week inquiry was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. The company lost all credibility as the doctored evidence of its consultants was systematically exposed by the independent experts of the opposition and the testimony of the public, and leaving no doubt that this mine would be a serious threat to agriculture and the environment. In the final days of the hearing, Kelbar revealed its secret plan to ship tens of millions of tonnes of radioactive heavy metal ore along Melbourne's suburban rail network to Geelong Port, potentially irradiating thousands of innocent commuters as they wait on the station platforms, including those in the electorate of Planning Minister Richard Wynne, who would shortly be deciding the fate of Kelbar's mine.
If the decision is that the mine can't go ahead, the investors in Kelbar will be depressed and saddened.
It's now time for the government to listen to the concerns of the community and not allow mining in this area because the environmental risks are too high.
3 months after the inquiry ended, Planning Minister Richard Wynne released his decision. He found that the mine should not go ahead because the environmental, economic and social impacts of the project are unacceptable.
And have you had celebrations?
Yeah, champagnes to go and then back onto the red wine, and it was just a long haul, like 7 years of fighting a mine company. It was just very, very hard. We shouldn't have to do this, like, you know, a group of people should have, whether government officials or something, looked at the site and said, no deal, you can't do it there, like, and that way it would have saved us all this time and bother and stress and everything. And we need a buffer zone around this industry and the river of maybe 5 or 10 k's, so nothing can come and interfere with these industries.
What's happened here at Glenelladale has shown that fighting is worthwhile. We actually won. Nobody thought we had a chance, but we actually won. All the concerns that we had have been validated. It's been 8 years of stress and heartache and financial hardship for people that they just should not have gone through.
Although the state Labor government is now committed to stopping the mine, the Planning Minister's decision has no legal power. A future government could ignore the decision and approve the mine anyway. And the local Nationals MP Tim Bull has failed to promise that once the Nationals are back in government, the area will be excluded from any future mining proposals. The community here won't feel safe until all Kelbar's mineral leases are cancelled by the government.
What's going to happen with those areas? Is Kelbar just going to say, oh, well, we'll forget about the fingerboards and we'll move up the road to one of our other licences, and then we have to go through another 8 years of buggery? The Minister for Planning's decision is not the end of the uncertainty for everyone. It's not the end of the stress. It doesn't allow us to get on with our lives.
Soon after the mine was stopped, mighty Kelbar resources vanish into thin air. Nothing remained except this abandoned office and a Facebook page frozen in time, while its lonely CEO is still promising that the mine will soon be approved.
Now, are you still planning on the mineral sands mine going ahead?
Yes, we are. Yep.
Are your financial backers happy with the changing plans?
Yeah, well, they're still supportive. I mean, as I said, we really had taken on board quite a few.
Kelbar's wealthy owners may not escape. They now face a legal class action by community members, alleging the company subjected them to intimidation, harassment, misinformation, and damage to their business interests. And the people who lost millions investing in Kelbar resources through the dodgy UK front company, Appian Capital Advisory, must now suspect they've been swindled. We asked Appian why it had encouraged investment in such a shonky, unproven mining project. They responded with a veiled threat to sue us. There are now over 300 mining exploration leases, granted or pending, across Victoria, issued by the Earth Resources Regulator. That's 300 other communities who may suffer what Glenelladale has just lived through. Many of those leases are in East Gippsland and include areas devastated by the 2020 Black Summer fires, including the communities of Buchan, Mossy Face, Sarsfield, Wairera, Combined Bar, Mallacoota and many more. Across East Gippsland, vast exploration leases have been issued that threaten some of the region's most iconic natural areas and the tourist industries they support. These leases have been handed out by the regulator without any concern for the environmental damage mining will bring. The mining industry has acted like an invader, taking the land, dividing communities, lying, damaging the environment, then walking away. And until Victoria's mining law and its regulator are reformed, no one should trust a word that they say.